The first question is from Nidhi Bahuguna and it's addressed to Dr. Arvind. Will the US repair Iran relationship? Will EU risk annoying US? Your view, sir.
Thank you very much for that question. I think dealing with Iran and will be one of the most difficult tasks that the new administration will face. We have seen some of the statements which have come out from Biden and from his team members that they are ready to deal with Iran provided it first complies with its JCPOA obligations. But I think the issue is that there is no thinking that JCPOA itself is probably a limited agreement, and they would like to include new areas like Iran's missile potential, missile development, as well as its regional relations. Now, this is something that Iran would not like to do. Also, there is this question of sanctions, because if Iran wants to, if there is going to be a fresh negotiation of JCPOA, then Iran would like the sanctions to be lifted. But whether the US would lift sanctions as a precondition for new negotiations is very doubtful. So I think it's a very difficult situation. So my view is that US-Iran normalization is not anywhere close. So that is the first question.
Sir, second part, sir.
The second part was about whether European Union would risk annoying the US. I think they have already done so by signing the comprehensive investment agreement with China. If you look at the commentary which is coming out of the US and from Europe, I think they are very divergent. And the fact is that by this agreement, the US ability to deal with China has been reduced and weakened quite considerably. Today, the new situation is that EU is willing to go its own ways. The fact is that the Trump administration imposed sanctions on its own partners, NATO partners, on Germany, on many other partners. So the EU is quite miffed. The fact that the Trump administration wanted the EU to do burden sharing in NATO, that is something that has not quite happened, although they were under pressure. The EU is quite worried, and the commitments of the US to NATO and to EU security has also been questioned. And then, of course, there are differences within the EU also. There is this new Europe and there is this old Europe, and they have very different views about how to deal with China, how to deal with Russia, etc. So this is the main issue today in a new geopolitical order. It's the weakening of the alliance between the US and EU that is beginning to happen. And although Biden has said that it would like to repair that alliance system, but we'll have to see whether that happens, and particularly after these latest events that have happened in Washington.
Thank you, sir. The second question, sir, for General Bikram. This is from General Dushyant Singh. While we need to be prepared for the worst case in military domain, the space for conventional operations is shrinking. Example, China has cleverly kept operations which precludes conventional war. In such a scenario, it would make more sense to develop capability to deal with threats in hybrid and grey zone. Your comments, please, sir.
विक्रम को करो अनम्यूट अनम्यूट करो देखिए अभी muted.
Can you just repeat the question? I couldn't hear you. There was a lot of distortion. Yeah.
Right, sir. I'll repeat it, sir. This is from General Dushyant. While we need to be prepared for the worst case in military domain, the space for conventional operations is shrinking. Example, China has cleverly kept operations which preclude conventional war. In such a scenario, it would make more sense to develop capability to deal with threats in hybrid and grey zone. Your comments on this, sir?
Firstly, a good question by Dushyant. In fact, he got in touch with me and before I was invited officially by Chaturvedi. It's an excellent question from the point of view that what's happened is in the hybrid arena, but then it is not the end as yet. Let's be very clear. You know, when the wars are fought in 4 stages. And these 4 stages are, first stage is engage and or deter stage. The second stage is seizing initiative. Third is decisive operations. And the fourth is transition, where the civil administration comes and takes over the area, and the areas are handed back depending on the negotiations, whatever takes place at the negotiating table. Now, I do not think that the space for the conventional war fighting is over, because we are in the engagement and deterrence stage. As you would have seen, you know, between Iran and United States, it's taken over 15 years. This stage has gone in for almost 15 years. In between, they are struck, you know, at various places, trying to neutralize the general officer of Iran, who was, you know, targeted in Baghdad. Same is the case in our scenario. We are in a stage which is going to continue for a couple of years. It's not going to bend. It's the beginning of a war fighting stage. So let's not discard the conventional operations. After all, what is the problem? Let's look at logically. That is, what is the end state China would be seeking from us? You know, the aim of war is to use force to have your adversary accept your conditions and your terms. Would India accept the terms and conditions of China if China continues with this kind of hybrid warfare? No. It will only result in attrition. It will result in a certain amount of subversion, lowering of morale. But then let's not forget that even we are carrying out the same activities with China. So therefore, if territory is the issue, which is the end state China is trying to seek and resolve, it has got to have boots on ground to be able to achieve that. Those territorial gains cannot be done through hybrid warfare alone. So hybrid warfare is going to be a precursor to a conventional war in case required, if China has to occupy these areas. But please remember, we are in the first stage, which is the engagement and or deterrence stage, which will be followed by seizing initiative and then the decisive option. So let's not close the options as far as the conventional ops are concerned.
Thank you, sir. The third question, sir, this is from Ambassador Suresh Goyal, and it's addressed to Dr. Rajiv Kumar. I agree completely that the economic growth will be central to our strategic ambitions in the Indo-Pacific and globally. Are our present production-driven policies adequate to ensure the required double-digit economic growth? What about consumer demand, particularly after the huge loss in incomes at the lower and the lower middle income level? The majority of the consumer demand comes from.
Unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Ambassador Goyal, and for that question. I think it's an important one. And thanks for re-emphasizing the fact that it is economics that will make or break our own aspirations going forward, both globally and domestically. Our current policies, as I said, I'm afraid I have to be very blunt, require more change to achieve that sustained growth rate. We have, because of our very vibrant and necessary democracy, we have been forced in many cases to take populist decisions, which I think sometimes imply that the shorter political horizon, electoral horizon, doesn't often reconcile or is not in sync with our long-term, horizons, the long-term interests, the long-term national causes. I think we need to change that. The Prime Minister has been very clear in telling us and telling everybody else that we will not achieve this unless development becomes a Jan Andolan. And I think this is the key. This is the mantra today, because just as we couldn't achieve our independence until 1940, until Mahatma Gandhi gave the call for quit India in 1942, or undertook the Salt March, Dandi March, where the peasantry got involved. where every individual Indian felt that he or she had to do his bit to achieve independence, we couldn't progress towards our independence. But once we did that, it took us only a few decades to achieve it. Similarly, today, development is our, it has to become the cause célèbre for all of us. It's not just the government who would do it, in a democracy especially. I'm saying this because we know what is to be done. We know the policies to be taken. As I outlined to you, we need to switch, for example, the tariff rates, the electricity tariff rate between residential consumers and industrial consumers. Same thing with railway freight and passenger rates. But are we able to do it? We are not. Simply because the common person, the common Indian, still does not reconcile his or her short-term self-interest with a long-term narrow interest. We behave in sectional terms. We behave in very sort of kind of very narrow terms, and this has to change. So clearly we need better change, more policy reforms. We need deeper policy reforms in many areas, which I can outline once, because the time doesn't permit that. But to underlie the basic fundamental thing is that we need to create the groundswell, the ground for that, and the people's support for that. And this is where all of us can work together to create the proper ground for taking reforms which will take India to sustain growth in the coming 3 decades, which is, again, to repeat myself more than once, which is imperative for India to achieve its global and domestic aspirations.
As India finds herself sandwiched between the US and countries such as Russia or Iran, specifically with reference to purchase of the S-400 or other investments, should we really play a balancing role or assert our priorities as a matter of right?
Who is this question addressed to?
Sir, to you, sir.
Arvind Gupta. Dr. Arvind Gupta.
Okay. This S-400 issue is becoming serious. The Americans, they impose sanctions on Turkey, who is their NATO ally, on this S-400. Now, in my view, I think India should assert its priorities. S-400 is important for us, and that's how it should be, because it would be quite counterproductive at this time to annoy Russia. And I think the Americans should also try to understand what our bottom lines are. So S-400, if we have taken a decision to buy from Russia, we should stick with it and not necessarily come under pressure from the US. Because if US needs India, India needs US. It has to be a two-way street. But yes, the problem will remain and that we'll have to be under some kind of a pressure on both sides. Now, as far as balancing role is concerned, I think we should shed this mindset of India becoming a balancing. If we are seeing ourselves either in balancing role or in hedging roles or in swing roles, all these fancy terms which the international relation theorists use, I think we will remain stuck where we are. If we have decided that we want to be a major power, a power which will contribute to the humanity, to the world, and to, of course, our own national interests and so on, then we should plan for it. And with that will come a lot of responsibility. That will come some criticism also. But I think we should have a clear strategy about it. And this balancing role, etc., we should jettison and build our capabilities, as Dr. Ajay Kumar has said. Because moment you build your capabilities and capacities, people will look at you in a very different way. So I don't think that we should really look for any balancing role. We should look at our own national interests, and where necessary, we should align. I think that is the way we'll have to proceed.
Thank you, sir. General Bikram, sir, there's a question from General Watts for you. Basically, the impact of Chinese-Pakistan collaboration and the impact it would have on our national security plannings.
Well, this aspect has been flogged a hell of a lot, over the last couple of months on the television discussions. Let's be very clear. It opens basically two fronts. In the worst case scenario, when you have this nexus of China and Pakistan, the greatest challenges in terms of two front capability, which we need to have, for that matter, two and a half, given that, of course, half being the terrorists coming and, tampering with our lines of communications and our supply chains. So from that point of view, I think it is a challenge, but then we have a requisite combat part that we have developed. As far as Pakistan is concerned, against China, we have the defensive capability. Let me tell you, to give a bloody nose. If you really come to think of it, what is the end state that would define, in the present scenario, a victory for India? I feel, and having been an Eastern Army commander, we used to analyze this, it's the status quo. If we can achieve status quo, which we have been able to achieve so far, even in Eastern Ladakh, along the McMahon line, I think we are doing well. That's the reason I said in the beginning, we are doing a great job. The second thing to be noted is, as I brought out earlier, this metamorphosis in our style from an idealistic nation to embracing realism, where the use of force is an option and we accept it as an option. We have demonstrated that at Balakot. In fact, I think this morning only there was an article wherein one of the diplomats of Pakistan has accepted 300 casualties in the raids that we carried out, aerial strikes we carried out at Balakot. So we have created the deterrence. Pakistan knows about it. Pakistan may like to play this from the point of view of trying to keep India engaged so that, it can continue and look after its domestic audience. Today, Pakistan is in turmoil. Its economy is in tethers, it's in bad shape. So I don't think Pakistan would like to do anything. It may demonstrate its solidarity in terms of perhaps building up and pinpricks along the line of control, but Pakistan can do sausage, if you ask me frankly. It is China that may do something in the decisive or in the seizing initiative stage, as I brought out earlier, and we got to guard against this. We are well placed, let me tell you this. We may not have the offensive capability to the extent till we build another mountain strike corps. 17 corps is already there. But I think we are well placed militarily to deal with both the fronts when required. And of course, the government is committed towards ensuring the combat power is well honed, restructuring takes place, and new acquisitions come in to make sure our combat power is bolstered.
Thank you, sir. The last question is from General Brajesh Kumar for Dr. Rajiv Kumar. We have a tough task ahead in terms of economic growth in all sectors with respect to investment, debt, PP participation, cost of doing business, compounded by political opposition, obstinate bureaucracy, and attitudinal changes in public at large. Mammoth by any standards. Way ahead as you or the government of India is thinking of managing.
I will say, one, I think it's the most important thing, as he says himself, is to recognize that it is a mammoth task, but also to recognize that it's a task that has to be undertaken, and that is a task that has to be successfully undertaken. For us, I think it's key that the way we look at it in Niti Aayog is to define our focus, is to define our priorities as best as we can, and then go forward. And in these priorities, the 4 points that I laid out to you. One, we are going to be looking at very closely how to improve our financial sector so that our private sector receives the kind of capital that it does. Today, the rate of growth of credit has come down to 5.8%, which used to be 22% in 2007. We need to bring that up. We need to, therefore, do whatever is required to improve our banking sector, to set up a long-term debt financing institution. So that's on the one part. The other part is, of course, to modernize our agricultural sector. But for me personally, and by the way, by the modernization of agricultural sector, Niti Aayog is pushing the agenda for chemical-free agriculture in India, for natural farming. And that we have now shown about 50 lakh farmers are practicing this in about 10 states. You don't use any chemicals, so your net income of the farmer goes up significantly, and all the debt crisis go down. There are several priorities, but the two most important for me are human resource development, both in education, quality of education, our health, the nourishment, etc., and finally to take care of our exports, because we cannot succeed unless we drive exports. $300 billion of export compared to $1.7 trillion, $1.7 trillion that of China. Our share in world trade stagnating at 1.6%. We will not be able to achieve the kind of growth rate that we require, especially because we know that our exports are far more labor intensive and employment generating than the other sectors are. So again, that is where we need a consensus in our country that our exports need to be promoted, and for that, whatever steps we have to be taken should be taken. There are several others, but I think those are the four major priorities at the moment. Last word, we cannot go forward if we remain a country where 38% of our children are stunted and undernourished. Now, that's something that we need to work at very urgently, because in a knowledge economy, an undernourished child means undernourished, underdeveloped mental child. And I think that just cannot go forward. So let's try and develop a consensus on that issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now hand you over to General Chaturvedi for the concluding remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure everyone will agree that it was a great learning on the way contours of geopolitics of world are going to shape up in the near future, and what are going to be the challenges, both in domain of security and economics for India in near and medium term. It's indeed true that the pandemic COVID-19 has added altogether a new dimension to the geopolitics and geoeconomics. New roles of engagement have to be evolved for the world to arrive at a new power balance. Simultaneously, the Armenian-Azerbaijan war has clearly flagged the increasing role of technology to shape the future battlefields. Whether Chinese ambition and attended actions will be able to dethrone US from the role of superpower of the world, or it will be a multipolar world, is still in the realm of speculations. To recapitulate today's proceedings, the Army commander set the ball rolling by giving a very detailed environmental scan highlighting the emerging geopolitical power metrics. Some of the issues he highlighted was the post-COVID disruptions, geopolitical alignment, turmoil in US and its impact, emergence of China post-COVID and Chinese-Pak equation, Russia jostling for export of technology and its slowly gaining preeminence, Islamic assertion, need for ASEAN and Turkey assertions. India's role in this change environment needs to be discussed. Dr. Arvind Gupta, in his very erudite scholarly presentation, talked about new Cold War perspective. He mentioned that US will find it difficult to reassure its partners. Comprehensive investment agreement has its own issues, which has resulted into what we are perceiving and what is going to happen. China is trying to set itself as a preeminent power, rewriting, and as such they are trying to rewrite the history, export economic model in the form of BRI and digital BRI and RCEP. And China's in 10-year largest, they are aiming to be 10 years largest economy. China has need to be cause a concern for our thinkers. Stress in the polarity is another very, very important aspect he addressed. Race for technological dimensions which need to be, and especially military technology, which needs to be addressed. India needs to put its house in order, and that was the underlying factor from his, and that is where non-traditional threats are assuming great importance. Fate of globalization post-pandemic has to be thought of, that ultra-globalization has to be reduced to little more, say, interdependent world. In this connection, environmental issues, increase in consumerism has to be checked. Opportunities have to be found in challenges and the calamities. India needs to be vigilant about China Park Texas, China's expansionism, new technologies like hybrid warfare, and new Cold War. My old boss, General Vikram Singh, was put slightly in the awkward situation because many of the areas were covered by General Dr. Arvind Gupta. But hats off to General Vikram Singh. He gave a very, very new dimension to the strategic environment. There are some of the issues he mentioned. Threats to has to be seen through national perspective. He mentioned about that strong economy as a part of CNP, that is comprehensive national power, has to be understood and to be aimed for. Use of CNP for national interest. Indo-Pacific area is important, but in his perception, and I tend to agree, that IOR is far more important for us. Area east of Strait of Malacca, with China coming down to Henan, is assuming great importance. We need to look at region as a comprehensive national interest. That was his point. Sensitivity to the aspirations of ASEAN cannot be sacrificed in our exuberance to support initiatives by US, and we cannot become a front man for US to further his interest in IOR and Indo-Pacific region. Quad, he deliberated and he said that implication for Quad's headquarter coming up in Andaman and Nicobar Island, as he was mentioned about, the kind of impact it will have needs to be taken into account. He mentioned about strategic risk management and US. I mean, this has to be thought of, that US does not think in terms of Indian interest, he takes off more of their own interest. Dilution of institution is another aspect which he deliberated on and which need to be taken note of. Role of media in the comprehensive national power is as important as other aspects. We need to aim for balanced power. Cyber arena is very important. J&K challenge and hybrid warfare in Northeast, we got to remain vigilant. With assertive China, hybrid warfare in Northeast is likely to go up. Dr. Rajiv Kumar made economics so simple for us, and he made something very, very important points. One was health versus livelihood issue he raised. Contraction of economy and the way we have come up is something which needs to be pressed on. He mentioned that prospects of economy, despite a 7.7% contraction anticipated for this year, for 21-22 will be good, but we need to go for nominal about say 15% and actual about say 10% growth. We need to work harder on this issue. Government spending needs to grow up, and 4 areas which he said the challenges: lack of adequate capital investment, lack of energy resources and the cost of energy, logistics support system needs to improve, and regulatory deficit needs to be made up of. What he mentioned was development has to become a Jan Andolan, and that is where the populism has to be given a go by. Need for policy reforms. Now all that is left for me is to convey a sincere thanks to Honorable Army Commander, Lieutenant General I.S. Guman, Dr. Arvind Gupta, General Vikram Singh, and Dr. Rajiv Kumar to have spared their valuable time and shared their perspective on such an important topic. We, the team Strike, feel blessed that such luminaries have been part of today's webinar. We hope and pray that we shall continue to have lean on their support in our endeavor to spread the strategic culture in future too. I also take this opportunity to convey our thanks to MGGS Central Command Major General Gajendra Singh for his valuable support, without which it would have been impossible for us to hold a webinar. We are thankful to China's cell of Central Command, particularly Lieutenant Colonel Gaurav Singh and Lieutenant Colonel Nitin Sharma for their contribution for their smooth conduct. The webinar couldn't have been possible without the technical support of the Central Command Signal Regiment. We place on record our sincere thanks to Colonel Amrut Kulkarni and his dedicated team of Lieutenant Colonel Pandey, Vijay Jha, Captain Chetan, Captain Vineet Jakhmola, and Nabsubdas Sahu. We are also indebted to a vast number of veterans and others who have participated in the webinar. My apologies to all of them whose questions we could not take up, but we assure you that we have taken note of all the questions and we'll try to convert it into a kind of a paper, and which will, with the support of our esteemed speakers, and we'll put it on our website. With the support of such a response, we are highly encouraged and would like to assure all our viewers that the team Strive remains committed to do transformative research on topics related to national security and nation building, and will continue to share our studies with you in future too. This brings us to the close of today's webinar, with the hope that we shall meet again on another topic of national interest. Team Strive, thanks you all. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Now we can close it down.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Rajiv.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.